Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a night of spine-tingling terror. Tonight, we journey deep into the heart of the wilderness to share some of the most horrifying camping tales ever told. Prepare yourself for a night of fear and suspense as we uncover the dark secrets lurking in the shadows. So pitch your tents, gather close, and let the nightmares begin. I was hanging out with a guy in my small rural town, where one of the few things to do is drive around country roads, listen to music, and eventually find a quiet spot to park and chat. We call this road riding, and everyone does it. We were driving down a one-lane road when we turned onto a gravel path. The gravel eventually gave way to dirt, and soon it was just two tire tracks winding through the woods. I asked him if he knew where he was going, and he assured me that he'd been coming to this spot for years. He was a really creative guy, always writing songs and working on various projects. We were having a good time in his car and eventually reached the middle of a clearing. At this point, there was no semblance of a road. We were truly in the middle of nowhere. Once we parked, he turned down the music and we started talking. But I remember him talking about how limited most people are in their thinking and how there's so much more out there than what we've come across. It was about 1 or 2 a.m., pitch black outside, and we had turned off all the headlights. The only light came from the dimly lit radio softly playing in the background. As he was talking, I started to feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up for no reason. I wasn't particularly creeped out by what he was saying. I actually found it quite interesting. But the air started to feel heavy, and my body became incredibly aware that we were not alone. The atmosphere felt electric, as if something was manifesting itself. It was an utterly unnatural feeling that I'd never experienced before. About 30 seconds after I started feeling this way, he stopped, looked at me, and asked, "Can you feel that?" I couldn't even speak, so I just nodded. The moment I nodded, the entire clearing was lit up with a bright light. It wasn't like a flashlight or lightning bolt. It was steady and lasted for a good 5 seconds before fading out. We stared at each other in panic, and I finally shouted, "Get out of here!" He fiddled with the ignition, trying to drive away, and the whole time I felt impending doom. I had never felt more like I was going to perish than at that moment. And there wasn't even a visible threat. I've dealt with anxiety my entire life, so I know what it's like to feel unnecessarily helpless all the time. My fight or flight reflexes go off randomly throughout the day, but this was different. This was the scariest moment of my life. I went from being totally happy to be sitting in a car with this super good-looking guy to fighting back sobs of terror. We made it out, and once we got to the main road, all he could say was, "What was that?" My response was a shake of the head and an, "I don't know," too. He dropped me off, and we never spoke about it again. This is the first time I've brought it up since then, and I legitimately feel terrified and clam up every time I start to tell someone about it. I feel like whatever was in that clearing with us did not want us there. It didn't want to talk to us about what we were doing and was giving us a warning. I should also mention that the radio turned off with the flash of light, and when we tried to drive away, the car acted like the battery was dead for a moment before finally turning over. We hadn't been there long, so there's no way the car died while we were talking. It seems super coincidental that it would just do that the moment the lights filled the clearing. This was a brand new car. I've staffed a summer camp for 5 years now. A long-standing tradition is that some of the senior staffers regularly sneak out during the night and drive into town to hang out and generally be hooligans. One night, 4 other guys and I parked a car around the bend from the parking lot to avoid waking up the adults. We hopped inside and headed towards the town. After a few hours of jokes, Baya blasts from Taco Bell, and teaching one of our friends how to drive in an empty parking lot, we were driving down country roads, joking around and listening to music. That is until we turned down a random road and something immediately felt off. It was about 3:30 a.m. As we started down a hill, Suddenly, the road went from asphalt to gravel to dirt. We then noticed a rusted boat trailer on its side, a bunch of old tools, rotting piles of wood, and general mess. When we reached the bottom of the hill, there was a big shed with a garage door wide open and another shed seemingly made out of plywood with a door slightly open. There was a light shining through the crack of the door, faintly flickering, and a fuse box right outside the door. The mood in the car changed in an instant. For a moment, we all sat in silence, watching the lights flicker. No one said anything, but we could all tell something didn't feel right. Eventually, to ease the tension, we started to joke as teenage boys do, daring one of our friends to turn off the light or open the door. Suddenly, the door creaked open. The next few moments were a blur, but I can assure you that was the fastest an early 2000s Toyota Camry has ever booked it up a dirt road. All 5 of us stayed nearly silent during the 15-minute drive back to camp. Something about the aura of the place felt off. To this day, when I imagine sitting in the front seat of that car, I get an uneasy feeling in my stomach. Was someone behind the door? Why were they there at 3:30 in the morning? This happened fairly recently. My boyfriend and I decided to spend a night camping to escape from our daily routine. We settled into our tents and fell asleep. Around 4 a.m., I was awakened by rustling sounds near our tent. There aren't many large animals in our area, so I was curious about what it could be. I checked my watch and guessed it had to be an animal, not wanting it to get too close. I decided to peek outside to scare it away, knowing there was nothing dangerous in the vicinity. I stood up, unzipped the tent, and looked around. There was nothing in sight, but I listened closely in the darkness and heard the rustling again. The footsteps grew louder, and as I peered behind the tent, I heard it run off. Relieved, I zipped up the tent and went back to my sleeping bag next to my snoring boyfriend, who hadn't noticed a thing. Unable to shake off a feeling of uneasiness, I tried to go back to sleep but couldn't. It was nearly 5 a.m., and I decided to sit outside and stay alert until daylight. As I waited, the rustling returned, this time more hurried. I looked around but saw nothing. After a few minutes of silence, I finally thought it was gone. But then I heard it again, right beside the tent. I turned quickly and saw a man on all fours, dressed in dirty clothes, grinning at me creepily. He stood up and ran off into the woods, hiding behind a tree. I screamed for my boyfriend, Martin, to wake up, but he didn't. The strange man, who I dubbed Rat Man, continued to stare at me from behind the tree. Desperate for help, I yelled louder, and my boyfriend finally woke up, groggily responding with a, "What?" I screamed for him to come quickly, explaining there was a strange man outside. My boyfriend, who sleeps naked, emerged from the tent, not noticing his nudity and the urgency of the situation. As he tried to adjust his eyes to the darkness, the rat man ran towards him with a stick. My boyfriend narrowly avoided being hit and managed to tackle the man. In the scuffle, Rat Man spat in my boyfriend's face, enraged. My boyfriend kicked him and warned him to leave and never return. The Rat Man slowly walked away, swearing as he went, shaken by the encounter. We packed up our things and left as the first rays of sunlight appeared. To this day, I still dislike camping, and I hope to never encounter Rat Man again. Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed tonight's spine-chilling camping tales. Your support means the world, and I can't wait to bring you more heart-pounding horror stories soon. Stay safe, stay curious, and until next time, keep the campfire burning. Like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe the channel.